In a world of superheroes, in a world of weak and strong, in a sea of have and have-nots, I've survived the raging storm.
Here today we have Mr. Addison Witt. He's a talent manager, producer in the entertainment industry for 2 decades, professional consultant for actors, and he's an acting coach, developing actors that have gone to garner recognition by the Emmy with various charities including PWD, Performers with Disabilities, and United Cerebral Palsy, and Autism Speaks Against Bullying, and currently focused on raising money and awareness to fight MS, which his sister also suffers from. And I believe he has another charity that we'll talk about later. And we also want to recognize that this is National Mental Illness Month. So thank you and welcome to Daytime Primetime.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk with you today and take this opportunity to share some of what I do and any insight I may have to help your listeners find their own inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll start with Diann. Do you want to start or?
Sure. Hello, Mr. Witt. This is Diann. It's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Diann. It's a pleasure.
Okay. On Daytime Primetime, we like to emphasize the importance of inspiration and motivation. What is your daily motivation?
Thank you for asking that. You know, my daily motivation is driven largely by being an inspiration and aid to my family. My sister does have MS, and my younger sister, and we have always been very close. And so I have her picture here that's very close to me in my bedroom. And so a lot of my motivation comes from helping to make her life better. But I have to also say that in terms of inspiration and how I find that, it changes from day to day, because there are times when I'm inspired by life itself. You wake up and you know that's some good motivation right there. You have been blessed to get up and get out of bed, and you have another opportunity to start again, and that can be very exciting, and I do not take that for granted. So that's part of it for me.
Okay, sure. You have been a talent manager, producer in the entertainment industry for more than 2 decades. Was it always your desire to have a career in the entertainment industry?
You know, it's so funny how fast the time flies. I have been doing it a long time. Yeah, it was my desire. I remember when I was a kid, my father owned a dry cleaning business. And I remember an older man came in talking to my mother, and he was sort of a neighborhood person. There were lots of neighborhood people that used to frequent the dry cleaning business. And I remember he was saying to my mother, that kid's either going to be a lawyer, a preacher, or an actor. And I remember what impression that made upon me. And the funny thing is that I was licensed to the ministry when I was 18 years old, so I did become a preacher. I studied law for a while and wound up working briefly for a law firm. And then, of course, I became an actor and worked all through college as an actor. After college, when I first came to Los Angeles, I worked as an actor and ultimately became a talent manager. So I had a desire to work in the entertainment industry for most of my life, certainly throughout my teens and young adult years, and made that happen.
Wow. That's awesome. Okay. Well, you grew up in Texas in a large family. How big a part did spirituality play in your early years, and how does it impact your life today?
You know, I did grow up in Texas, and that was such a great place, particularly because my family owned a lot of land, a farm in Texas. My great-great-grandfather amassed more than 1,000 acres, and I grew up on this wonderful compound there in East Texas, and my father owned a dry cleaning business in Dallas. So we would spend summers in Texas, and then I would go to school in Dallas until my parents divorced, and then we relocated back to Tyler, where I spent the rest of my time growing up. And many of my relatives were either ministers or worked in the church. You know, it was a proper black family in the 60s. And so my great-great-grandfather and the men in the community founded the local churches. So there were two significant churches that played an important part in the development of my spirituality. One was Sunshine Baptist Church, Missionary Baptist Church, and the other one was Chapel Hill Episcopal Church.
Okay.
And so my great-grandmother was Baptist, and my great-grandfather was Episcopal. And so we would rotate between those two. And you know, for a family of color, revival was a really big deal, and there are lots of churches in the area, and that was the social time. My mother was very social. She loved going to church and being very social. She knew everyone in the community. And so those early years were really impactful in terms of the way I saw myself, the family dynamic, God, Jesus, and that later evolved into my own spiritual point of view.
Right. Well, one of my favorite songs gospel songs is Patti LaBelle and Gladys Knight's, their rendition of I Know It Was the Blood. What is yours?
Oh, geez, that's such an interesting question, because I grew up singing in the church, and I remember when one of my aunts came from California. I was 12 years old, and she was a prolific writer of songs and poems, and she wrote a song, I've Been Changed. And it was the very first time that anyone had given me a solo to sing, and I was so nervous. And at 12 years old, but I sang that song, and it made such a great impact in my life. But I have to say, I'm very much a traditionalist, and so the songs that have meant so much to me are old hymnals, like Amazing Grace, How Sweet the Sound That Saved a Wretch Like Me. That is still one of my all-time favorites. And even today when I go to church and I don't get to hear, a lot of the modern churches don't sing the old songs. Right. And so when, I miss them, and I think, I want to get up there and lead in the old songs.
Yes.
Okay. We wanted to talk about, you share a lot about your life on Instagram, which I love, because I love that you're able to, and I feel like that's why I can connect. Sometimes I talk to you and I connect to you, and it's just that I feel like I know you. I always say that to everybody, because everybody's like, gosh, you know so much about me, but it's something like I'm just passionate about people in general, and I love to uplift people, and I usually do like a quote or a few quotes a day to help people get through their day or help them get through something. So I wanted to talk about, because I saw the video, I remember there was a time, I don't know if it was a month ago, I think your mother was sick and also your sister. At the same time, you were looking for a place for her. And now I know she's in a comfortable place. But then there was another time she was in pain. And I just want you to know that seeing that, it touches me. And it helps me learn more about MS.
Thank you.
For that. But I want you to share your story about your sister.
Thank you very much. I think what happened with the last couple of years, my sister was diagnosed with MS. My sister had already been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizoaffective behavior. And that in itself had taken a toll on her. And but for the most part, she lives with my mother, and my mother's her sole primary caretaker. And she was still high functioning. She could walk, talk, communicate, travel. In fact, they would come out here periodically. And we would go about our lives looking for the best physicians, alternatives, methods that could help her and the quality of her life. When MS came along, it seemed to escalate very quickly. And it happened to coincide with my mother's need for a major surgery. And we had been talking about this surgery, which she had been putting off for some time. And as she was putting that surgery off, because, again, she was primarily taking care of my sister, she was becoming weaker and in need of more help herself. So it created a situation where they both were now in a compromised situation. And when I made the arrangement to fly down there and to have surgery, I did not realize the condition had reached the level it had. My sister had fallen in November of last year, 2016, and that really changed the playing field, because that fall intimidated her and made it difficult for her to trust walking again. Her walking had already become very difficult, and with MS, the pain, the joint pain is really significant. So by the time I returned in 2017, in March, she was bedridden and no longer able to speak and communicate. She was incontinent, and had to wear diapers. You had to spoon feed her, and she could not bathe or anything like that on her own. And my mother needed to go to surgery, so she went into surgery, I think, on March 31st, and so we had the surgery. And I did have relatives that came to, take care of my sister. And unfortunately, the surgery did not go as well as we had hoped. There was a nerve problem, and my mother wound up going back to the emergency room 3 or 4 times. Now, while she's home recuperating, my sister's MS had reached a point where her pain was off the chart. So I was there watching her, feeding her, helping them, and just taking care of some of their household needs while also maintaining my schedule here in Los Angeles. I didn't have to go to any red carpet events or show up at events or anything of that nature, but I still had day-to-day responsibilities. And I wanted my clients to also know that while I was away, I was still actively engaged and looking out for their careers. I think people, to some degree, would appreciate that I was doing what I was doing, but at the same time, too, it is a business, and people are in a business. They rely on me for some of their professional needs. So I wanted to maintain all of that, and I was able to do so. I think it did take me a little by surprise in the sense that both of them were bedridden, and both of them needed intense care. And we were led to believe that the surgery my mother was having would she wouldn't be down for more than a day or two, and that was simply not the case. And again, it was largely because it did not go as well as we had hoped. So I had to then place my sister in a hospital, rehabilitation hospital, and to give her some rest and also get that care, around the clock care that she needed. And my mother remained at home and was also in need of really extended stay, hospitalization. She was released after a couple of days. She should have been there a little bit longer. So I was driving back and forth, or Ubering back and forth between home, the hospital, staying a couple of nights with my sister in the hospital, then going back home. And again, I did have, like, my mother's sister and brothers came up, so there were people staying with her. But I was going back and forth, taking care of, they were in such a position I had to make sure everything was taken care of, their apartment and all of their administrative responsibilities. I had to cover those. And so it was an incredible amount of work. And I am very private, and I don't always post information about my family. It is a very personal
you're
thing.
a strong man, though. I have to say that. Just break in and say that. It shows that not too many men do that.
Well, I knew it would. Thank you, and I knew that it was important because it was also a time where I could not do it all alone, and I knew that I needed the strength of family, friends, and I needed God to be there, which I know God is always there, but I know that God works through people and others. And so I had to communicate, this is a need right now, and prayer can go a long way. And I have to tell you, doors swung open. I took my sister to the MS, Southwest MS clinic there in Dallas, and she was in so much pain. I had to literally lift her out of her wheelchair into the car, back into her wheelchair every time we stopped to go into a facility. We got to the doctor's office at 11:30, and her appointment was at 11 o'clock, and they would not see her until there was an opening. So we had to wait till 3 o'clock before we were seen. And she sat in that lobby, and she never cried. But you could look into her eyes and see that woman, 46 years old, was in the worst kind of pain. And because she's incontinent, she had also, gone to the bathroom on herself. And yet we couldn't leave. And I couldn't take her into like a bathroom like you would an infant and clean her. We had to sit there in that condition. And there were some people in there that came over to us and got on their knees and prayed for us in that moment. And caseworkers, social workers called me, and they helped me help her and got us into a facility where she could get around-the-clock care, and that led to getting her into the Plaza at Richardson, this rehabilitation facility, and which was much closer to my mother. And it so turned out that I was able to get my mother in the hospital and also the same rehabilitation facility where they both are currently in rooms across the hall from each other. So it was just amazing. It worked out. So many people were praying, so much goodwill. And so I thought it was important to update people and let them know what was going on with us as it was unfolding.
And I'm glad that you did. Strength in numbers.
Strength, yes, absolutely. Yes. I get it, and I felt it, and I thank you so much because I have to say, and I'll say this, that one day I wound up writing about this on Facebook particularly, and I shared the whole thing, and the reason is because, I had gone to the store to get the medication. We had the wrong prescription. The doctor wrote the wrong date. They would not give me the prescription. I had to go to 3 different pharmacies. By the time I got to the last one, they're like, can't help you. It was 9 o'clock. They were closing down. And I said to my mother through it all, as I was calling her on the cell phone and going, this is happening, that's happening, and, of course, she was in so much pain. I said, but you know what? I cannot complain. That's another one of my favorite songs, gospel songs, by the way. I won't complain. And I could not complain because I saw God working in so many ways, and I could only be grateful and experience that. And finally someone came running down the aisle saying, sir, come back. We'll go ahead and fill the prescription. And they did. And I walked home that night, and when I got home and gave them the medication, before we went to bed, my sister was smiling. Earlier that day, she was sliding out of her chair onto the floor because she couldn't hold herself up. I later learned that she had a kidney infection, which was also part of the pain. But by the time we got to the night, she was smiling. And we had been able to alleviate that pain, and my mother was able to alleviate that pain. So when I wrote what I did on Facebook, it was because I was so grateful, and I had to share that with other people. I did not feel sad, and I told people, please don't feel sad, because that was an amazing thing to go through when you have to be a caretaker for people and know that there's a higher authority and a higher power that is the wind under your wings and that's carrying you through and blessing you in the moment. I couldn't be anything but grateful.
Amen. I know that's right.